You went into the international break off the back of a fairly disappointing result against Dundee. How have you kind of worked to put that behind you as you go into this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously when you have the kind of defeat that we had against Dundee, then you really want the next game to come around pretty quickly, and unfortunately we've had a couple of weeks to let that one fester. You could argue it was possibly a good thing that we had the break, because we've had a number of players playing on the day that weren't quite at 100%, so it gave us an opportunity to get some good rehab into those ones, and they should be all good and raring to go for the game on Sunday against Ross County. But that Dundee game was so out of character for us in terms of the manner of the defeat, the goals that we conceded. There was a number of individual errors that unfortunately we were punished for on the night. So we can't dwell on it. We can't feel too sorry for ourselves. We've got an opportunity on Sunday to go and make amends and pick up 3 points.
Just how big of a game is this against Ross County?
Well, the next game is always the biggest game and the most important one, and that's what Ross County is. Depending on how results go tomorrow and all of the other fixtures, again we might have that opportunity, with a positive result to try and cement that top 6 position that we find ourselves in at the moment. So yeah, it's a big game. There's lots of different incentives there for everybody, but it's not an easy fixture. We know that. Ross County's home form in particular is very, very strong, and we're expecting a really difficult game.
You mentioned it there. You've been in the top 6 for the majority of the season. How important is it now that you don't put that good work to waste and end up in the bottom half before the split?
Yes, absolutely. It's it's really, really important that we finish the job off now. We've got 3 games to go prior to the split. I think if you went back to the start of the season before a ball was kicked and you asked most Dundee United supporters what their ambitions were for the season, I think the majority would have probably said to stay in the Premiership and consolidate and build on that next season. The fact that we've been in the top 6 for all season, expectations change. We all get a little bit greedy. We start thinking about not just top 6, but you start thinking about European football as well, and sometimes we can get a little bit too far ahead of ourselves. So as a group, we've tried to make sure we stay grounded. We've never got carried away. We've never for 1 minute assumed that the job was done. That message has been reiterated week after week after week, because we've all been in the game long enough to know what can happen if you take your eye off the ball. So we haven't had particularly great results in the last couple of months, and it's been disappointing in terms of our points return, but we have played some really tough opponents within that. But as I said, we've got 3 really important games coming up, and it starts on Sunday against Ross County.
How confident are you that you can stay in that top 6?
Well, I've got great belief in the group and in my backroom team. I think they've shown all season that they're a very, very good team. When we're on it, it's a very competitive league. I think results week after week would show that. There's not a great deal between a lot of the teams in it. We've been very consistent. The game against Dundee, as I said, it was really uncharacteristic of the group and of individuals who have in the main been very, very consistent. But these things happen in football, and you've just got to make sure that we learn from the mistakes that we made and make sure that they don't happen again between now and the end of the season.
Last one from me, any team news ahead of Sunday?
We're actually a lot healthier now going into this game as we were going into the Dundee game. So we're in a far better place, and all the players are chomping at the bit to be in that starting 11. It's my job to make sure I pick the right team and we get the formation right, the tactics right, and if we do that, then we give ourselves a really good chance of getting the result that we want. Thanks.
Just now entering the final 3 games before the split, just what are you looking for from your team in these final 3?
Well, I think we just need to get back to the basics in terms of our defending. Being resilient, keeping clean sheets, something that we've done really consistently at the beginning of the season. I think we're at that stage now with 3 games to go before the split. As much as we would all like really good performances and lots of free-flowing football, I think there's so much at stake now for every team in the league, whether you're fighting at the bottom to stay in the league, or whether you're in the position that we're in, fighting to be in the top six. The points mean so much to every opponent, so there's not going to be any easy games. And I think if we have to go to Dingwall on Sunday and grind out an ugly 1-0 win and take all 3 points, I'm pretty sure the staff, the team and the supporters would all take that.
There could be a lot of talk sometimes about the structure of the league and the actual split itself, but with games like this, like you mentioned, going in with so much jeopardy and teams fighting for so much, is it something you think does add that extra little bit of spice, I suppose, to games like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's a great deal wrong with our game. I know there's lots of conversation going along about extending the league and bringing more teams into it. I think that's a conversation for another day. But I think I think the Scottish Premiership this season has been a very exciting one. I think the introduction of the playoffs and of the split were really, really positive for the game. I think there's excitement there to be had for supporters at every team in the league, and it can only be good for Scottish football.
I suppose the key for your team at the moment now is to try and build that momentum going into those post-split fixtures.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, look, we've got 3 really big games: Ross County, Hearts, and St Johnstone. Like I said, all teams with something to play for, whether it's top 6 ambitions, European ambitions, or trying to avoid relegation at the bottom in St Johnstone's respect. So, there are no easy games. They're all big games, and I've got a really good squad of players that have done fantastic for us this season, having just came into the Premiership off the back of being promoted. I think we've exceeded expectations to this point, being in the top 6 pretty much all season, and it's just important now that we get the job done and make sure that we cement our place in that top half. If we can achieve that, then we can have further ambitions about trying to chase the teams above us.
Just finally for myself, off the pitch it was announced earlier this week that Michael Kearney will be leaving the club in the coming months, and you must be sad to see him go. Yeah,
of course. I mean, really disappointed to hear that Michael is going to be leaving. I think it's a compliment in some respects that we identified a really good head of recruitment who done a fantastic job for us and has attracted the attention of another club. There's a lot to the decision-making process for Michael in terms of the logistics of it. He's based down in England. The opportunity that has been offered is closer to home, and I would imagine there's a little bit more salary there involved in that as well. So from Michael's perspective, it's the right move for him. Of course, for us, we're disappointed to see him leave because we believe that this is the beginning of a long-term project for us, and Michael was an integral part to that, and I think the work that he's done for the club last summer in terms of identifying some really good quality players for us who have came into the team and done really well is a real positive on him. But it's a position that is very much sought after, and we can see that by some of the interest that we've already had in it. So between myself, our CEO and the chairman will sit down, go through the CVs, and hopefully make another real positive appointment in that head recruitment role.